Have you ever laid in bed at night, wide awake, replaying the same words in your head, words someone said to you days, maybe even years ago? You smiled in front of them, maybe even laughed it off, but deep down, something cracked, and now it lingers like a ghost, haunting your peace, stealing your focus, making you question your worth. Why does it hurt so much when people disrespect us, ignore us, betray us, or misunderstand us? Why does a single look, a careless comment, or a silence too loud feel like a punch to the chest? Because you're human, and being human means you feel things deeply. It means you care. You care about being seen, about being valued, about mattering in a world that's often too loud, too fast, too distracted to notice you. And when that world turns cold, when people treat you like you don't matter, that pain doesn't just sting, it lingers. It digs into your chest and whispers lies like you're not good enough, you're invisible, you're not worth it. But here's the truth most people never tell you. That pain, that ache you feel inside, it's not weakness. It's not a flaw in your design. It's a signal, a sign that you still care, a sign that your heart hasn't hardened, that you still believe in connection and respect and love. And while that's beautiful, it's also dangerous if you let the world decide how you feel about yourself. Because the world doesn't always give you what you deserve. Sometimes it gives you silence when you needed support. It gives you betrayal when you offered trust. It gives you ridicule when you showed vulnerability. And if you're not careful, you'll start believing that you are what the world reflects back at you. But you're not. You are more than the opinions of others. You are more than the rejection you faced. You are more than the failures, the heartbreaks, the mistakes. And no matter how deeply you've been hurt, there is something inside you that no one, not a single person on this earth, can take away. Your power to rise. You see, the people who seem unbothered, who move through chaos like they're untouchable, they weren't born that way. They were made, forged through pain, rejection, and disappointment just like yours. But instead of letting it crush them, they used it. They let the pain sharpen them, not shatter them. They learned that emotions don't have to be cages, they can be fuel, but that only happens when you decide. When you stop waiting for the world to treat you right and start treating yourself right. When you stop seeking validation from people who wouldn't understand your worth if it screamed in their face. When you look in the mirror and choose every single day to stand taller than your past, your pain, your fears, and that choice is available to you right now. You don't have to keep carrying the weight of what they said or didn't say. You don't have to keep bending just to be liked. You don't have to keep sacrificing your peace just to keep the peace. You can build something stronger inside, something untouchable, something unbreakable. This isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. It's about knowing who you are so well that nothing outside of you can define it. It's about being so grounded in your truth that insults bounce off, silence doesn't shake you, and betrayal becomes a lesson, not a scar. Because the moment you stop letting other people's actions dictate your emotions is the moment you take back your life. You don't have to be at the mercy of moods and moments. You don't have to be a puppet pulled by every judgment, every disappointment, every failure. You can be still. You can be calm. You can be untouchable, not because you feel nothing, but because you've trained your heart to rise above everything. And yes, it's possible. No matter what you've been through, no matter how broken you feel, you're still here, still breathing, still fighting. That means your story isn't over. That means you still have power left in you. And if you stay with this message, if you keep listening, keep open, and keep daring to believe in your own strength, you'll discover what it really means to become emotionally bulletproof. Not numb, not disconnected, but alive and unshakable. So if pain is a signal, not a sentence, what is it trying to tell you? It's telling you where your growth begins. Because the truth is, most people run from discomfort. The moment something stings, they retreat, they hide, they blame, they shut down. But what they don't realize is that discomfort is the doorway. It's the invitation, not to suffer, but to rise. Every emotional wound you've carried was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to expose where your strength was still sleeping. When someone criticizes you, your ego flinches. That sting, that's a signal. It's not just about their words. It's about the part of you that still needs their approval. When someone ignores you, the pain rises. That ache, that's a signal. It's revealing how much of your worth still depends on being seen by others. That doesn't make you weak, that makes you aware. And awareness is the beginning of power, because when you become aware of where it hurts, you begin to understand where your freedom lives. But here's the mistake. Most people fight their emotions. They treat sadness like failure. anger like shame, fear like a flaw. So they push it all down. They numb it with distraction. They silence it with fake smiles. But what you resist persists. What you bury grows. You can't bulletproof your emotions by pretending they don't exist. You bulletproof them by facing them head on and realizing they don't own you. Every time you feel triggered, you are being handed a mirror. And most people smash the mirror instead of looking into it. They lash out, shut down, or spiral. But the emotionally powerful do something different. They stop. They observe. They ask, why did that get to me? They look inward, not outward. And in that stillness, they take their power back. It takes courage to do this. It's easier to blame the world. It's easier to say they hurt me. And maybe they did. But staying hurt is your decision. Because emotional pain is inevitable, but emotional suffering is optional. And once you understand that, everything changes. You start to see pain as a teacher, not a curse. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this showing me about myself? That shift alone can break chains that have held you down for years. Because suddenly, the very things that once made you crumble now make you stronger. You don't grow in comfort, you grow in fire. And emotional fire burns away everything that isn't real. Your ego, your attachments, your false identities. What's left after the fire is you. The real you. The one who doesn't need to chase validation or escape judgment. The one who can walk through rejection and still keep walking. The one who owns their emotions but is never owned by them. This is where your emotional bulletproofing begins. Not by avoiding pain, but by turning toward it with clarity. Not by wishing it away, but by letting it shape you into someone stronger, someone who no longer breaks under pressure, but rises through it. The world isn't going to stop testing you. People will still misunderstand you. Life will still throw storms your way, but your response, that's your power. That's your freedom. Because when you train yourself to feel without falling apart, to process without reacting, to stand still in the fire, you become unstoppable. And this isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming clear. So clear in who you are, what you value, what you deserve, that nothing outside of you can shake what's inside you. You stop being a slave to every emotion that passes through. You start leading your life with intention, not impulse. That is emotional mastery. That is the armor forged through awareness and truth. And every moment you choose not to react but to reflect, you are stepping into that mastery. Every time you catch yourself about to spiral and instead choose stillness, you are becoming bulletproof. Not because you're unfeeling, but because you've learned to feel without surrendering your power. That's the reward. That's the promise. Not a life without pain, but a life where pain no longer defines you. A life where your emotions are messengers, not masters. A life where peace is no longer dependent on people, outcomes, or opinions, but on you. And when that happens, when your power comes from within, nothing outside can take it away. That's the version of you the world can't shake. The one no insult can weaken. The one no silence can silence. The one who doesn't crumble when tested, but sharpens. You are not here to react. You are here to rise. And every time you choose that, no matter how hard it is, you are becoming the version of you that nothing and no one can break. So what stops most people from reaching that version of themselves, the calm, centered, emotionally untouchable self? It's the lie they've been told since childhood. The lie that real strength means showing nothing, feeling nothing, that to be strong is to be stone, unmoved, silent. But that's not strength, that's suppression, and suppression is a slow poison. Because when you bury emotion, you don't eliminate it, you store it. It hides in your voice, your decisions, your body. It twists how you see the world, how you treat others, how you treat yourself. And one day, when pressure builds enough, it explodes. Not with purpose, not with power, but with damage. True strength isn't about silence, it's about control. It's the ability to feel pain, acknowledge it, sit with it, and still move forward. Not because it didn't hurt, but because you know who you are even when it hurts. You don't shrink. You don't collapse. You stand. Strength isn't cold, it's composed. Strength isn't numb, it's wise. It knows when to speak and when to stay silent. It knows when to fight and when to walk away. It knows that being unshakable isn't about not being moved, but about not being moved by anything that doesn't deserve to touch your peace. But how do you build that kind of strength? You stop reacting and start choosing. That's the difference between the powerful and the powerless. One reacts to everything. The other chooses their response. One is constantly thrown around by circumstances. The other stands grounded no matter what's happening around them. Reacting is automatic, it's emotional, it's impulsive. And in those moments, you hand over your control. You let the world dictate your state of mind. You let the past control your present. You let someone's bad day become your bad week, but when you respond, you reclaim that control. You pause, you breathe, you reflect. And in that moment, you become bigger than the emotion trying to control you. You might still feel anger, but you don't become it. You might feel sadness, but you don't drown in it. You might feel fear, but you don't bow to it. This is the shift from emotional reactivity to emotional leadership, from being pulled by everything outside to being driven by something strong inside. And here's the truth most people avoid. Emotional control is not about denying how you feel. It's about directing how you act. It's about giving yourself space between the trigger and your choice. And in that space is your power. That space is where transformation lives. Because every time you resist the pull to lash out, to collapse, to surrender to chaos, you're building a new mind, a stronger one, a mind that no longer follows emotion blindly, but leads it with clarity. That's what separates those who thrive from those who break. The ones who can keep moving forward even while their heart is shaking. The ones who know how to sit in discomfort without making it worse. The ones who train their emotions like a muscle, not to disappear, but to serve them. And yes, it is a kind of training, like going to the gym, but for your inner world. It takes effort. It takes repetition. It takes patience. But every time you choose presence over panic, reflection over reaction, intention over impulse, you're rewiring yourself for resilience. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be aware. You need to be honest enough to feel, but strong enough not to be led by every feeling. You need to recognize that your emotions are messengers, not masters. They knock on the door. But you choose who comes in. You choose what stays. You choose what defines you. And once you fully accept that you are not your emotions, you are the observer, the guide, the decision maker, your entire life shifts. Suddenly, the things that used to throw you off course start to lose their grip. The insults, the delays, the disappointments. You no longer see them as attacks, but as tests. Opportunities to practice your power. Opportunities to lead yourself. Because that's what emotional bulletproofing is really about. Not just surviving conflict, but mastering yourself through it. Not just keeping the peace, but becoming the peace. And once you've tasted that real, unshakable, earned peace, you'll never give it away again for anything less. Not for a petty argument. Not for approval. Not even for temporary comfort, because nothing compares to knowing you can stand solid no matter what's thrown your way. That's your edge. That's your freedom. That's what makes you untouchable. Not because life stops testing you, but because you no longer hand over your power to every test. And from that place, you rise. When you stop reacting to everything, you begin to realize how much of your energy was being wasted on things that didn't matter. Opinions that never paid your bills, insults from people who don't even know you, situations that felt urgent but were never truly important. All that mental noise, all that emotional chaos, it was draining your power, not fueling it. This is where detachment becomes your greatest tool. Not detachment from life, not detachment from people, but detachment from unnecessary emotional investment. Because when you overcare about everything, you become a slave to everything. Every look, every word, every outcome becomes a chain. And suddenly you're no longer living for yourself. You're reacting for everyone else. Emotional detachment isn't giving up. It's not being passive. It's choosing not to let the small things control your big vision. It's refusing to give your peace away to moments that don't deserve it. It's standing in the middle of the noise and choosing stillness, choosing strength, choosing clarity. Because not everything deserves a reaction. Not every insult deserves your attention. Not every failure needs to turn into shame. There's a power in walking away. There's a power in silence. There's a power in saying nothing because you know who you are and you don't need to prove it to anyone. That's not weakness, that's control. But most people have been conditioned to believe that being emotional equals being alive. That if you're not reacting, you're not real. That if you don't respond, you're being walked over. But true power isn't loud. True confidence isn't theatrical. It's steady, it's measured, it's focused. You don't need to shout when you know your worth. You don't need to argue when you're already clear. You don't need to win every battle because you've already won your peace. Let them talk. Let them judge. Let them misunderstand you, because every second you spend trying to fix how others see you is a second stolen from building the life you deserve. You are not here to convince. you are here to become. And becoming takes energy, focus, discipline, and those things cannot coexist with constant emotional chaos. So start asking yourself, who has access to your peace? Who gets to influence your mood? Who do you hand your power to? And more importantly, why? Every time someone's words ruin your day, you've given them control they didn't earn. Every time you dwell on someone's approval, you've tied your value to something you can't control. And the more you do it, the further you drift from your own center, the further you drift from your power. But when you detach, when you stop trying to please, stop trying to be liked, stop needing validation, you free yourself. You begin to move through the world, not based on what people might think, but based on what you know is right for you. You no longer chase acceptance. You walk in self-respect. You no longer beg to be seen. You become undeniable. And the more you detach from things that drain you, the more space you create for things that grow you. Clarity replaces confusion. Intention replaces reaction. Purpose replaces pressure. You stop getting lost in the noise because you're tuned into something deeper, your truth. This is how you start to lead yourself, not just in the good moments, but in the difficult ones, especially in the difficult ones, because anyone can be composed when life is easy. But emotional strength is built when everything in you wants to lash out, wants to break down, wants to quit. And you don't. You choose better. You choose wiser. You choose you. And yes, that takes practice. You're not going to get it right every time. You'll slip, you'll fall, you'll overreact. But the difference is, now you're aware. Now you're learning. Now you're rising. And every time you catch yourself faster, every time you respond instead of react, you're building the foundation of an emotionally bulletproof life. The kind of life where your joy isn't shaken by circumstances, where your confidence doesn't waver because someone disagrees, where your peace isn't for sale. That's not just emotional strength, that's emotional freedom. You were never meant to be ruled by emotions you don't understand. You were meant to feel them, learn from them, and lead them. That's what separates those who stay stuck from those who rise above. Those who live in reaction and those who live in creation. And you're not here to be at the mercy of life. You're here to master it, not by controlling what happens, but by controlling how you show up. And when you truly detach from what doesn't serve you, you gain the ability to fully attach to what does. Your vision, your values, your purpose. So protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. Protect your attention like it's gold, because it is. And remember, the most powerful version of you isn't the one that reacts to everything. It's the one that rises above, calmly, steadily, and with purpose. The moment you start protecting your energy, something shifts inside you. You begin to realize how much of your life you've spent handing pieces of yourself to people who didn't value them, chasing validation, explaining your worth, trying to be understood by those who were never even listening. And now finally you see it for what it is, a distraction from your growth, a distraction from your mission, a distraction from the quiet power that's been waiting inside you all along. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to stop giving people the keys to your peace. Every time you let someone else's behavior determine your mood, you're saying, here, take control, decide how I feel today. But they don't deserve that power. No one does. Because your emotions, your state of mind, your mental clarity, that's your territory, that's your responsibility. And when you stop outsourcing it, you step into a version of yourself that no one can shake. It begins by recognizing the truth. People will judge you no matter what you do. You could be the kindest person on earth and someone will call you fake. You could succeed and someone will call it luck. You could fail and someone will laugh. So if judgment is guaranteed, why live your life trying to escape it? Why spend your days trying to fit into boxes that were never built for you? You weren't made to be controlled by opinion. You were made to walk in truth. And truth doesn't beg. Truth doesn't explain itself to doubters. Truth simply is. And when you align with it, when you stop trying to convince and start trying to become, you start feeling something new, power, real power, quiet, solid, grounded power. That's the kind of power that can't be taken away because it's not based on applause. It's not built on performance. It's built on clarity, and clarity is magnetic. When you know who you are, the world begins to move differently around you, not because it changes, but because you've changed. You no longer get pulled into every drama, every insult, every test. You observe. You choose. You move with purpose. And that unnerves people because most people live in emotional chaos. They don't know what it feels like to be calm in a storm. So when you stop reacting the way they expect, when you don't flinch, don't chase, don't beg, they start to feel their own noise. And that silence, that stillness you carry, it speaks louder than anything you could ever say. It says, I know who I am. I don't need your permission to be at peace. You begin to realize that not everyone deserves access to your energy. Not everyone deserves to hear your plans, see your heart, or know your thoughts. Your mind is sacred space. Your time is limited. Your focus is everything. So be selective, not out of pride, but out of protection. Because what you feed grows. What you give attention to gains power. And you can't afford to water weeds anymore. This is the discipline of emotional strength. Not just reacting less, but investing smarter. You invest in thoughts that uplift, habits that build, environments that sharpen. And you stop giving emotional discounts to people who only drain you. Not because you're heartless, but because you've learned to love yourself enough to stop bleeding for people who won't even notice the wound. Let them wonder why you didn't respond. Let them guess why you pulled back. Let them talk. That noise is not your concern. Your concern is your direction. Your concern is your growth, your peace, your purpose. The longer you entertain what's beneath you, the longer you delay what's meant for you. And that life you're trying to build, that version of you you're becoming, it's not going to happen if you're constantly distracted. If you're always explaining, if you're always looking back. Growth demands forward. It demands focus. It demands that you choose yourself, not out of ego, but out of vision. Because when you choose yourself, you don't abandon others. You simply stop abandoning your own needs to please everyone else. You're not here to be agreeable. You're here to be aligned. And alignment requires boundaries. It requires saying no. It requires walking away sometimes, not with anger, but with certainty. Not to punish, but to protect. Because you've come too far, endured too much, to keep giving your peace away to people who haven't earned it. So remember this, your emotional space is not public property. You don't owe access to everyone. You don't owe responses to every criticism. You don't owe explanations for every decision. What you owe is to yourself, to honor your energy, to guard your growth, to protect your peace like your life depends on it, because it does. Because peace is not found, it's built. And the more you protect it, the stronger it becomes. Until one day you realize you're no longer bothered. Not because the world stopped challenging you, but because you stopped giving it the power to break you. The moment you stop giving the world permission to break your peace, you begin to reclaim something deeper, self-respect. Not the kind built on pride or appearance, but the kind forged in solitude, in silence, and self-honesty. Because real self-respect isn't loud. It's quiet. It doesn't chase attention. It doesn't ask for permission. It just is. And when you carry it, people feel it. Even when you say nothing. There is a calm that comes from no longer needing to be chosen, praised, or accepted. A calm that replaces desperation with dignity. That calm is built when you stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of others. When you stop compromising your values to be liked. When you stop shrinking to avoid conflict. Every time you silence your truth to make others comfortable, a piece of you disappears. But every time you honor your truth, even when it's hard, even when it costs you connection, you grow stronger, more whole, more real. You're not here to bend for people who don't respect your boundaries. You are not here to explain your worth to those committed to misunderstanding you. You are here to stand in who you are. Even when it's inconvenient, even when it's lonely, even when it's unpopular. That's self-respect. It's choosing yourself without guilt. It's walking away from what drains you, even when it looks good on the surface. It's saying, I am enough without needing anyone else to agree. And the truth is, when you respect yourself, everything begins to shift. The way you walk, the way you speak, the way you make decisions. You no longer seek clarity from people who thrive in confusion. You no longer chase love from those who offer it with conditions. You no longer settle for being tolerated in spaces where you deserve to be celebrated. Self-respect is the filter that removes what doesn't serve you. It teaches you to stop begging for scraps when you were made for abundance. It reminds you that your time is valuable, your energy is precious, and your presence is a privilege. When you see yourself clearly, you no longer allow others to define you. Their labels fall off. Their opinions fade. Because you know who you are, and that truth can't be stolen. But don't confuse self-respect with arrogance. Arrogance is loud and fragile. Self-respect is quiet and solid. Arrogance demands recognition. Self-respect doesn't need it. It's not about thinking you're better than others. It's about knowing you're not less. It's about drawing a line and saying, this is where I protect myself. This is where I stop bleeding for people who won't even hand me a bandage. You become more selective with your words, with your time, with your company. Not because you think you're too good, but because you've finally realized your value. And when you start acting like someone who respects themselves, you stop tolerating disrespect, even in subtle forms. You stop making excuses for behavior that's beneath you. You stop over-explaining, over-giving, overcompensating. You realize that anyone who truly values you will never ask you to lower your standards to fit their comfort. Anyone who genuinely respects you won't test your limits, they'll honor them. And anyone who's meant to be in your life will never make you question your worth. Self-respect isn't something you find, it's something you decide. It's a commitment, a declaration, a boundary that says, I won't betray myself to keep the peace. I won't abandon my truth for temporary connection. I won't trade my dignity for validation. Because you don't need to be liked by everyone, you need to be respected by yourself. And when you hold yourself to that standard, everything changes. Your posture, your peace, your power. That's when you become emotionally bulletproof. Not because you don't feel, but because you've built something inside that can't be moved by every passing storm. You've learned to stand in your own worth, even when no one claps for you. You've learned to walk away, even when your heart wants to stay. You've learned to say no, even when it would be easier to say yes. You've learned that your silence is stronger than their noise. Your stillness is louder than their chaos. Your peace is more valuable than their approval. And when you get to that place, life begins to bend to your strength, not your wounds. Because you've stopped bleeding for attention and started building for purpose. You don't have to explain your strength to anyone. You just have to live it, quietly, relentlessly, unapologetically. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who shout about their battles. They're the ones who've turned pain into power and scars into standards. That's who you're becoming, not cold, not numb, but clear, focused, grounded, unshakable. And the world will notice, not because you asked it to, but because power like that cannot be ignored. When you carry that kind of strength, quiet, disciplined, undeniable, you no longer chase control over people. You focus on mastering yourself because real power has never been about controlling others. It's always been about governing your own mind, your own emotions, your own reactions. That's the battlefield. That's where the war is either won or lost. Too many people try to manipulate what's outside before they've mastered what's inside. They try to change opinions, change outcomes, change others, while their own thoughts remain undisciplined and their emotions own them like puppets. But the truth is harsh and freeing at once. If you don't rule your mind, something else will. Fear will, doubt will, insecurity will, the opinions of others will. But when you decide to take back that power, to lead your own mind with clarity and intention, you become dangerous to anything that tries to break you. Because now, instead of being reactive, you become strategic. Instead of being impulsive, you become deliberate. You no longer act out of habit, you act from choice. And choice is everything. The difference between those who stay stuck and those who rise is not talent. It's not luck. It's the ability to pause, to feel the trigger and not let it control them. To experience the emotion, acknowledge it, and still make a conscious decision instead of a reactive one. That is emotional maturity. And that maturity is what makes you emotionally bulletproof. When someone disrespects you, the immature response is to strike back, to match their energy, to prove a point. But the disciplined response is to pause, to evaluate, to ask yourself, does this deserve my attention, or is this just a distraction? Is this about me, or is this about them? Because 9 times out of 10, it's not about you. It's about their own chaos, their own insecurity, their own internal war. Don't make it yours. Let people underestimate you. Let them project. Let them misunderstand your silence for weakness. Because while they waste energy trying to provoke a reaction, you conserve energy by mastering your response. That's where your edge is. That's where growth lives, in the space between what happens and how you choose to handle it. That space is where most people collapse. But not you. You are learning to expand it, to protect it, to stretch it wider each day, until nothing can drag you back into patterns that no longer serve who you're becoming. That gap between trigger and response, that's your freedom, that's your power, that's your evolution. You've done emotional survival. You've experienced emotional chaos. You've known what it feels like to be reactive, to be ruled by impulses, to lose yourself in emotions you couldn't control. But now you're entering a new phase, one where you don't run from your feelings, you command them, you don't repress them, you respect them without letting them lead your life. This isn't about perfection, it's about awareness. It's about building the mental muscle to observe before reacting, to choose before speaking, to lead before following the old scripts of pain and ego. Every time you do that, every time you respond with intention instead of instinct, you're building a new version of yourself, one that doesn't fall for the same games, one that sees through emotional manipulation, one that doesn't hand over power just to keep the peace. This level of self-mastery requires training. Just like building your body, building your mind takes reps. It takes showing up every day and practicing the pause, practicing the breath, practicing the discipline to not react just because you feel something intense. You can feel anger and still choose peace. You can feel fear and still walk forward. You can feel triggered and still stay grounded. That's not ignoring your emotions, that's leading them. Because feelings are real, but they're not always right. They're not always rooted in truth. Sometimes they're echoes of old wounds. Sometimes they're fears dressed up as facts. And if you follow every feeling without question, you'll live a life ruled by ghosts. But when you lead with clarity, you begin to separate signal from noise. You begin to hear your true voice, not the voice of your wounds, but the voice of your wisdom. And the more you listen to that voice, the more powerful you become. You begin to trust yourself in chaos. You begin to move with unshakable inner direction. You stop asking, what should I do? And start declaring, this is what I choose. That shift alone changes your entire life. Because in a world full of noise, clarity is rare. In a world full of reaction, restraint is rare. In a world full of chaos, composure is rare. And anything rare holds value. You become valuable, not for pretending to be perfect, but for becoming someone who is dependable in pressure, someone who others feel safe around, someone who leads from the inside out. That's what emotional bulletproofing is really about. Not about being emotionless, but about being in full command of your emotional state. Being the calm in the storm, the strength in the silence, the stillness in the noise. That's your edge, that's your armor. And it's built moment by moment, decision by decision. Every time you choose to respond with power instead of reacting from pain. When you operate from that level of emotional control, the world starts to look different. Not because it changed, but because you did. The chaos is still there. The noise, the pressure, the opinions, the criticism, they all still exist. But now they no longer hold the same weight. They no longer dictate how you feel, how you move, or how you see yourself. You've created separation between what happens and what you allow to define you. That's where your freedom begins. Because the truth is, most people don't break because life is hard. They break because they internalize every hit. They don't just face pain, they become it. They don't just feel rejection, they start to believe they are unworthy. But not every emotion deserves a home in you. Not every experience needs to become a story you carry forever. At some point, you have to decide what gets to stay and what gets to leave. That's why discipline of thought matters. Because your mind will try to protect you using fear. It will try to keep you small under the illusion of safety. It will try to convince you that reacting is surviving. But surviving and evolving are not the same. Survival is fear-based. Evolution is choice-based. Survival is reactive. Evolution is strategic. And the second you understand that, you stop being a passenger to your emotions and start becoming the driver. The emotions will still come. You're human. But you don't have to give them the wheel. You acknowledge them, but you don't worship them. You feel them, but you don't follow them blindly. You observe them like clouds passing through the sky, temporary, changing, powerless unless you choose to feed them. That's not detachment from life. That's attachment to purpose. And the more grounded you become in purpose, the harder it is to be shaken by anything temporary. Opinions become background noise. Conflict becomes information, not identity. Setbacks become data, not defeat. Because your peace no longer depends on perfect circumstances. It depends on your decision to rise. Every single time. But that rise doesn't happen by chance. It happens through relentless self-respect. Through holding the line when it would be easier to fall back into old patterns. Through silence when anger tempts you to explode. Through stillness when anxiety begs you to panic. Through poise when the world tries to pull you out of character. That's what people won't understand at first, why you don't engage, why you don't react, why you become so selective with your energy, so intentional with your presence. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. You're not trying to be better than anyone, you're trying to be better than who you were. You're not trying to be untouchable, you're trying to be unshakable. You're not cold, you're clear. Because you've come to realize that your time, your attention, your peace, these are not cheap. And when you treat them like they're valuable, others begin to treat them that way too, or they don't and they leave. Either way, you win. You filter out everything that no longer serves your highest standard, not through force, but through presence, through the weight of your peace, through the power of your calm. This isn't about walking through life without feeling. It's about walking through life without being ruled by those feelings. It's about becoming emotionally fluent, able to recognize what you feel, understand it, and still choose what builds you rather than what breaks you. That's emotional fluency. That's strength. Because strength isn't just about holding it together when things are going well. It's about who you are when they're not. When you're overlooked, misunderstood, challenged, underestimated, that's when your training shows. That's when your discipline either holds or collapses. And every time you hold steady in those moments, you harden the armor, you fortify the core. You rise above the noise, not to escape life, but to lead it. And the world needs leaders like that, not more reactors, not more noise, not more drama. It needs stillness, it needs clarity, it needs people who know how to stand tall in the middle of storms without becoming one. That's your role, not because you're perfect, but because you've chosen the higher road over and over, even when it's harder, even when it's lonely, even when no one's clapping for you. This is the cost of becoming bulletproof. You will lose people who don't want you to be this strong. You will outgrow environments that fed your old identity. You will become a threat to every system that thrives on your emotional chaos. But you'll also become free, free from the need to prove, free from the grip of judgment, free from the cycle of reacting, apologizing, regretting, because now you lead yourself. And when you lead yourself, no one else can lead you off track. You move with vision. You respond with wisdom. You carry your peace like a shield, not to block out the world, but to walk through it untouchable. That is your power. That is your edge, and it's only just beginning. Emotional bulletproofing is not about becoming numb. It's about becoming so deeply rooted in who you are that no force outside of you can uproot your peace. It's not suppression. It's transformation. It's when you take every trigger, every insult, every storm, and instead of letting it weaken you, you convert it into fuel. You burn it into discipline. You melt it into resolve. And in doing so, you create something unshakable inside, something untouchable. There comes a moment when you realize you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to explain yourself to be valid. You don't have to match energy. You can rise above it. That is the power of restraint. And restraint isn't weakness. Restraint is power under control. It's knowing you can react, but choosing not to. It's knowing you can destroy, but choosing to build. It's knowing you can be loud, but choosing to be clear. That kind of inner command is rare. And that's why it's respected, sometimes silently, sometimes grudgingly, but always deeply. Because people can sense when you've mastered your emotional state. They feel the difference. Your silence speaks louder than their shouting. Your calm unsettles their chaos. Your presence doesn't demand attention, it commands it. And that's not ego, that's integrity. That's what happens when you've stopped outsourcing your self-worth. When you've stopped depending on external validation to feel whole. When your emotions serve your purpose instead of sabotaging it. Every time you choose not to react to provocation, you're not letting someone win. You're protecting your energy. You're proving that you're no longer a prisoner to their behavior. You're declaring that your peace is no longer up for negotiation. And that declaration happens quietly, but its impact is loud. Because when you become immune to emotional traps, the game changes. They can't bait you because you see the trap before it's even set. They can't shake you because you've already settled into yourself. They can't define you because you've already done that work internally. And doing that work requires a level of honesty most people avoid. It means facing the parts of you that used to crave approval, that used to react from pain, that used to depend on chaos for a sense of identity. It means sitting with your discomfort instead of running from it. It means asking hard questions like, why does this bother me? What wound is this poking? What am I trying to protect? This is the kind of work that doesn't show up on the surface, but changes everything beneath it. That inner restructuring is where real power is born. Because once you start healing, you stop leaking. You stop leaking energy into pointless arguments. You stop leaking peace into people who don't value it. You stop leaking time into emotions that drain you. Healing doesn't make you soft. It sharpens you. It refines your vision. It heightens your awareness. And suddenly the things that used to shake you feel small, not because they got smaller, but because you grew. You start to realize that emotional strength is not loud or flashy. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's the stillness in your soul when everything outside is trying to provoke movement. It's the ability to sit with uncertainty without losing direction. It's the knowing that you have nothing to prove because you're not driven by ego anymore. You're driven by growth. Growth is quiet. It happens in the moments no one sees. It happens when you choose discipline over comfort, when you choose the higher road when no one is watching, when you sit with the urge to react and instead breathe through it. That breath, that single moment of pause, can change the entire trajectory of a situation. Because in that pause, you reclaim your power. You remind yourself, I am in control. Not my anger, not their behavior, not this moment of discomfort, me. And from that control, you act, not react. You speak, not lash out. You move, not flinch. That is how leaders move. That is how warriors think. Not because they don't feel, but because they've trained themselves to lead their feelings instead of being led by them. The more you do this, the stronger the muscle becomes. Emotional resilience is built through repetition. You don't become bulletproof overnight. You become bulletproof every time you choose power over panic. Every time you choose growth over ego. Every time you walk away from what no longer matches your standard. That's how you rise. Quietly, consistently, powerfully. And eventually you stop fearing emotional pain. You stop fearing discomfort. You stop fearing rejection. Because now you know who you are, even in your lowest moments. You know your values, your mission, your worth. And that kind of clarity makes you immune to emotional games. You've trained your mind. You've harnessed your emotions. And now your presence alone speaks volumes. You don't need to react. You just need to stay grounded. You just need to keep showing up with discipline, with clarity, with intention. That's what makes you emotionally bulletproof. Not perfection, but power built on inner mastery. Not indifference, but peace built on discipline. Not ego, but strength built on deep self-respect. And that kind of strength isn't loud, but it's undeniable. It doesn't scream, but it echoes. It doesn't chase, but it attracts. And once you've built it, no one can take it from you, because it was never about them to begin with. When you reach this place of emotional mastery, everything in your life begins to shift. You no longer live at the mercy of fleeting feelings or external chaos. Instead, you become the calm center that others unconsciously seek. Your energy changes. Your aura deepens. People sense your stability even before you say a word. That magnetic presence is not born from luck or charm. It's forged in the fires of relentless self-discipline and unwavering commitment to inner peace. This transformation doesn't happen by accident. It requires a conscious decision every day to prioritize your mental and emotional health over momentary gratification. It means valuing your peace above petty conflicts, valuing your time above meaningless drama, valuing your growth above easy distractions. Every time you choose to guard your boundaries, you build strength. Every time you refuse to engage in emotional battles, you reinforce your armor. Every time you pause and breathe instead of reacting, you deepen your roots. And those roots don't just keep you steady, they make you unshakable. Because life will never stop testing you. The storms will come. The triggers will appear. The voices that try to knock you off balance will shout louder. But when you're anchored in this kind of emotional resilience, those storms become opportunities. Opportunities to practice calm. Opportunities to exercise control. Opportunities to rise above and prove to yourself that you are not defined by the chaos around you, but by the peace you carry within. That's the secret weapon of emotional bulletproofing, turning every challenge into a moment of growth. Instead of allowing your environment to dictate your emotional state, you dictate how your environment affects you. You don't need to change what's outside, you change what's inside. And that inside change ripples outward, altering your reality in ways you never thought possible. When you live this way, your relationships transform. You stop reacting to others' moods and instead respond with understanding and calm. You stop being a victim of emotional manipulation and instead become a beacon of steady strength. You don't need to control others to feel safe. You control yourself, and that control radiates outward. People feel it, they respect it, they trust it. And suddenly, you attract those who match your energy, people who uplift, inspire, and support your growth instead of draining it. This is not just emotional armor, it's emotional magnetism. And it begins with self-awareness, knowing what disturbs your peace and choosing not to give it power, knowing what fuels your soul and nurturing it relentlessly. It's a daily practice of tuning in, checking in, and adjusting course when needed. Because being emotionally bulletproof isn't a one-time achievement. It's a lifelong commitment to your highest self. With this commitment comes clarity. Clarity about what you will accept and what you will not. Clarity about who deserves your time and who doesn't. Clarity about how you want to feel and what you will do to protect that feeling. This clarity is like a lighthouse in a dark sea. It guides your decisions, protects you from drifting, and helps you navigate even the roughest waters without losing sight of your destination. And when you operate from clarity, confusion disappears. Doubt fades. Fear loses its grip. You move forward with confidence because you know you're aligned with your truth. You no longer waste energy on things that don't serve your vision. You no longer get pulled into battles that aren't yours to fight. Instead, you conserve your energy for what truly matters, your growth, your purpose, your peace. This is the profound power of emotional bulletproofing. It's not about avoiding pain or discomfort. It's about mastering your response to them so thoroughly that they no longer control you. It's about becoming so skilled at self-leadership that external chaos bounces off your armor harmlessly. It's about creating a sanctuary within yourself where peace reigns no matter what rages outside. Imagine the freedom in that. The freedom to be yourself without fear of judgment. The freedom to face criticism without losing your balance. The freedom to walk through any storm knowing you carry an unshakable calm inside. That's the kind of freedom that changes everything. It's the foundation for true happiness, true success, true fulfillment. And it's available to you now. Not someday, not when life is easier, but right now. Because emotional bulletproofing is a choice, a practice, a way of life that anyone can begin at this very moment. It starts with awareness, it grows with discipline, it blossoms through courage, and it shines through consistency. So make that choice. Choose to be the calm in the storm. Choose to be the leader of your emotions. Choose to protect your peace with unwavering commitment.